Los Angeles, May 1953. A man sits in his living room. He's one of the most intellectual, formidable human beings alive. The author of A Brave New World. A man who has read everything, thought about everything, written about everything. He spent his entire career mapping the human condition from the outside. And today, he's going inside. His friend, a British psychiatrist named Humphry Osmond, dissolves 0.4 of a gram of mescaline in a glass of water. Huxley drinks it. They sit. They wait. 90 minutes later, Huxley looks at a small glass vase on the table. It contains 3 flowers: a rose, a carnation, an iris. He stops talking mid-sentence. What he sees in the next few moments will occupy the rest of his life. Because what he sees is not a hallucination. What he sees is more real than anything he has ever seen before. The flowers are not beautiful. They're not symbolic. They're not reminding him of anything. They simply are. With a completeness and a vividness and a sheer, undeniable there-ness, a suchness that ordinary consciousness had never once allowed him. He's seeing what the flowers actually are for the first time in his life. By the end of this episode, we will explore this strange territory and discover why it does not lead to enlightenment on its own, and how you can open the same valve by yourself, with your mind only. Welcome back to Quantum Awareness. Sound is emptiness, emptiness is sound. I'm QP, your quantum preceptor. Now, before we begin, if these conversations are getting through your filter, if you've listened this far, they clearly are, please subscribe, like and share with one person who might be ready to hear it. The algorithm is its own reducing valve, and your engagement is genuinely how we open it for everyone. I would really like to hit 500 subscribers, and every single one of you who's gotten us here so far, I'm very grateful. So in this podcast series, we've been discussing consciousness from many different perspectives. Now, I can no longer avoid it. We have to address the elephant in the room. The elephant that so many began to experiment with in the 1950s. The molecule, or more accurately, the molecules. No conversation about consciousness would be complete without it. Who was Aldous Huxley, and why does it matter that it was him? Well, the first thing, this is not a counterculture experiment. This is not Timothy Leary at a party. This is one of the most rigorously educated minds of the 20th century, sitting down with a substance and another scientist to ask a philosophical question. The question was simple. Is ordinary waking consciousness the only form of consciousness available to a human being? If you've been listening to any of my other episodes, you already know the answer. No, it's not. Aldous Huxley was born in 1894. His grandfather was T.H. Huxley, the man who fought Darwin's battles, the greatest scientific communicator of the Victorian era. Aldous grew up surrounded by the greatest minds in Britain. He lost most of his eyesight as a teenager and spent years in near blindness, which perhaps trained a quality of the inner attention that his contemporaries never developed. He became a novelist, an essayist, a philosopher. He wrote Brave New World in 1932, one of the most prescient books of the century. He wrote the Perennial Philosophy in 1945, a masterwork of comparative mysticism, showing that beneath the surface, differences of the world's spiritual traditions, the same essential recognition was being pointed at. He'd spent 30 years mapping the territory of consciousness from the outside, from the library, from the page. In 1953, he decided to go there. And the man who went with him, Humphry Osmond, was not a drug dealer or a provocateur. He was a serious British psychiatrist who'd been researching mescaline's therapeutic potential and who coined a word for these substances that we still use today. Psychedelic, from the Greek psyche, mind, and delos, manifest, not mind distorting, not mind destroying, mind manifesting. And what the mind contains but cannot ordinarily access, made manifest. Every human culture in history has understood this, has found a way to open the valve, in ceremony, in ritual, in the sanctioned temporary dissolution of the ordinary self. Modern Western society forgot. Huxley was trying to remember. 25 centuries before Huxley sat down in the Los Angeles living room, a man sat with his assembly on Vulture Peak in India. Everyone was waiting for the teaching, the words, the doctrine, the map. The Buddha said nothing. He picked up a single lotus flower, turned it in his fingers. The entire assembly sat in confused silence. Only one person smiled. Mahakashyapa, a smile of direct recognition. Not intellectual, not conceptual. The smile of someone who in that moment saw the flower as it actually was. The Tathatā of it, the suchness, the bare, undeniable isness of a lotus being a lotus, with nothing added, nothing taken away. The Buddha said, "This, that cannot be spoken, is the transmission." The whole of Zen flows from that smile. Now in 1953, Los Angeles, Huxley looks at the rose, the carnation, and the iris. And something happens that he spends the next year trying to put into words, knowing that the whole time that the words cannot reach it. He writes afterwards that what he was seeing, what Adam saw, on the morning of his creation, the miracle of naked existence. Not flowers he liked or flowers that reminded him of anything, just flowers being flowers, with a completeness that ordinary consciousness had never once permitted. In Sanskrit, tathatā, suchness, the bare reality of a thing before the mind labels it, categorizes it, relates it to everything else, files it away and moves on. In Tibetan Buddhist epistemology, this is prayaksha, direct perception, the bare sensory event before anumana, conceptualization, inference, floods in and replaces that experience with a representation of the experience. Ordinary consciousness barely touches prayaksha before anumana slams the door shut. You see a flower for a fraction of a second, and then you see your idea of a flower, your category, your memory, your association, your judgments of the flower. The flower itself, the actual flower, the tathatā, its suchness, is long gone before you ever really had it. And this is what we're talking about when we say be here and now. Mahakashyapa's smile said, "I see it." Huxley's Mescaline held the door open long enough for him to see it too. The same territory, just 25 centuries apart. One got there through a lifetime of practice. One got there through 4/10 of a gram dissolved in water. And the question hanging over both, the question that this entire episode is really about, is not whether the territory is real. It is. The question is, what do you do with it once you've seen it? So, I want to tell you about two moments. The first was in practice, during a Diamond Mind retreat. Deep in the sitting, nothing unusual about the session. I just started crying. Not from sadness. There was no story attached to it. No memory, no grief, no object. Just tears. The kind that come when something that's been held for a very long time is briefly released. The valve opened a small amount, and something that had been compressed, behind it, something I didn't even know was there, came through. That is the Kleshavarana moving. Not dramatically, quietly, the way a knot loosens itself in warm water. As the tears rolled down my cheeks, it was like a warm hug and a calm, like when you're told that everything's going to be okay. The second was a few weeks ago. I was with my therapist, and I put something down, something I'd been carrying for a long time, long enough that I'd stopped noticing the weight of it. It wasn't mine. It never was mine. Someone had given it to me, the way people give each other their pain when they don't know what else to do with it. And I accepted it. More than accepted it. I made it my favorite pain. The one I returned to, the one I knew how to carry. I don't have it anymore. I left it in that room and I walked out. The air was different. Not dramatically different, just cleaner. One less filter between me and what was actually there. I told my therapist he needed to clean the chair I left it on after I left. That's what the first veil dissolving actually feels like. Not a blinding light, not a revelation, just something that was in the way is no longer there. And you notice, almost with surprise, how much more of the signal is getting through. And most importantly, how much closer you are to joy than you were to anger. Huxley saw it in three flowers. I felt it in tears, with no story and a room, and I walked out differently. The territory is the same. The valve is always available to open. No molecule needed. I hope this reaches you even if you've never heard of Huxley, never sat in a retreat, never thought about the reducing valve. Because everyone has a favorite pain that they didn't know wasn't theirs. Now, someone whose understanding of these things that goes far beyond mine once wrote his doctorate thesis on Aldous Huxley. His conclusion? The chemical can show you the door, but only you can go through it. The entire counterculture of the 1960s was trying to understand consciousness. Many of them had moved on to harder, more addictive experiences. I tried to help some of them, and I'm sure I did. But many were convinced that enlightenment could come from a molecule. I knew they were wrong. If you don't know the door exists, the molecule can help. That's where it ends. Most people end up burning all their fortunate karma up in a few evenings, with nothing else to show for it. He paused. Only the Dharma, the four basic thoughts, the refuge, the paramitas can take you through that door and give you lasting change. Wow. Nothing could be more clear to me than that. Here's the concept that makes Huxley's Afternoon more than a beautiful story. The philosopher Henri Bergson proposed in the early 20th century that the brain is not a generator of consciousness. It's a filter, a reducer. Its job is not to produce experience, it's to narrow experience. Take the vast field of what's available and compress it down to a thin beam that a biological organism needs to survive, navigate, function, and reproduce. Huxley took this and gave it a name. The reducing valve. The brain, he argued, is constantly filtering, constantly suppressing. The full signal of reality, whatever that is, however vast it might be, is being narrowed through the valve of the nervous system into the manageable trickle we all call ordinary waking awareness. Now, we think this trickle is the whole river. We think this narrow beam is all that there is. The mescaline loosened the valve, not by adding anything, by removing the filter. What came through was not a drug effect superimposed on reality. What came through was reality. The signal that was always there, always available, that the brain had been quietly, efficiently, comprehensively suppressing your entire life. The flowers were always those flowers. Huxley just finally got to see them, really see them for the first time. Now, here's where the science catches up. We talked in this series about the default mode network. You know, the brain's storytelling system, the thing that generates the running narrative of the I. the same system that powers down in deep meditation, that quietens in deep sleep, that LaBerge found temporarily suspended in lucid dreamers. In 2014, Robin Carhart-Harris at Imperial College London showed that psychedelics work primarily by suppressing the default mode network. His rebus model, relaxed beliefs under psychedelics, showed that the brain is a prediction machine. It constantly generates a top-down model of reality and filters incoming sensory information through that model. What doesn't fit the model gets suppressed, and what confirms the model gets amplified. Psychedelics relax the top-down predictions. The bottom-up sensory information, the actual signal, the Tathatā, the suchness, gets through. Carhart-Harris in 2014 was describing in neuroimaging what Bergson described philosophically in 1908, and what Huxley described experientially in 1953. The reducing valve. 3 descriptions. 1 mechanism. So there we have it, the end of part 1. Thank you for listening this far. Philosophy, experience, and neuroscience, all about 60 years apart. The same reducing valve described from 3 completely different directions. And here's what I want you to sit with before you hear the next episode. The Tibetan tradition had been working with this exact mechanism through practice, through sustained inner investigation, without chemistry, without a laboratory, for 1,000 years before any of them. Not describing the valve from the outside, but dissolving it from the inside. How, you ask? That's where we go next. This is QP, Sound is Emptiness, Emptiness is Sound. Catch you later in part 2.